Hi, I'm Axel, and I'm here today with Simon and Garfunkel to rank the top 100 best songs of the year 2023. And you should keep watching if you want to find out if I'm hiding a GIMP under there. Now, why am I ranking the top songs of 2023 now? It's a good 3 years later by this point. It's a good question, and yeah, I'm aware that I'm a little bit late, but it just takes me a while to do things. I'm just one guy, and plus I figured that no one else is doing, the top songs of 2023 anymore, so it might as well be me. Now, if you're struggling to remember much music from 2023, you're probably not alone. I think it's safe to say that the following year, 2024, was a lot more impactful for pop culture, pop music in particular, and well, if you look at the Billboard year-end singles charts from 2023, you'll find in the top 5 Morgan Wallen's Last Night, Miley Cyrus's Flowers, SZA's Kill Bill. That's pretty good, but that's a 2022 song. I'm going to be pretty strict on that. 2023 releases only. Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero, and then this last one caught me by surprise as well. Metro Boomin, The Weeknd, and 21 Savage with Creepin'. Which is fine. It's a fine song, but it's basically just a cover of Mario Winans' I Don't Want to Know. You know that, you know if you hear it, I don't want to know if you're creeping. That historic moment in pop culture in 2004 when the paths of none other than P. Diddy and Enya crossed paths. And the result was a massive, inescapable hit. But anyway, that's kind of the top 5 most streamed, most bought songs of the year according to Billboard. At the Grammys, for another metric of what was big in 2023, you've got Flowers, again winning, Miley Cyrus for best song. You've got Taylor Swift's Midnight's album, controversially winning best album, and then Billie Eilish's What Was I Made For as best record. I'm never quite sure how it works. I don't really care at the Grammys. Anyway, What Was I Made For? That's a good song, but also maybe an overall kind of helpful indicator that 2023 was a bigger year for cinema than it was for music. That song, of course, being from the soundtrack to Greta Gerwig's Barbie film. But all of that, I think, is all the more of a reason to focus on the best songs of 2023, because some of this stuff that I'll be talking about here, you probably have already forgotten. Some of the stuff you might not have vibed with as much when it came out. You might have overlooked it. So maybe I can try and recontextualize it for you, look at it from a different light, tell you what I found great about it. And then some of the stuff is probably going to be new discoveries for you. Some of it might even be a little bit weird in my taste. So I guess that kind of depends how online you are. And then, yeah, with all of that, I've obviously got my biases, as does anyone. I've tried to make this list as comprehensive and varied in different styles of genres as possible, both, not just genres, but also countries of origin, languages, all of it kind of synthesized from the many hours I've spent listening to music in 2023 and in the years since, because this is, of course, another advantage of doing this list so late. Unlike, reviewers that at the end of the year struggle to kind of compile a list of everything that's been overlooked and everything that was good in music in a given year, I've had quite a lot of time to sort of, scan around and look at some stuff that might have fallen under the radar when it first came out, and that I think still deserves to be talked about, still deserves its flowers. Not Flowers by Miley Cyrus. I didn't think that was very good. Sorry. But anyway, to put an end to all of this ado, here's the list, the first part of it. And let's start with a particularly baffling one, shall we? Here we go. Ицык, Ccyper, Dymok. Right. So this was not the Gremlin. The song was a big hit in Russia and in many other parts of the Russian-speaking world, sort of a year after it came out, kind of broke online, went viral in 2024, including in the singer's country of origin, which is Kazakhstan. So Ицыk Ccyper is the vaguely Yiddish-sounding name of this Kazakh 60-something former real estate worker. Their sort of civil name is Igor Tsyper, who basically just wrote a stoner anthem, right? Dymok is Russian for smoke, and then set it to what's essentially a tropical house beat. Yes, bear with me. But it's because it's like, it's kind of like a minimalist tropical house. It also shows an influence of, I would say, like Witch House, was really popular in the early 2010s. Maybe even a little bit of sort of like brutalized burial style garage, buried, if you will, deep in there. But then also, despite all that, on top of all that, it's basically also a chanson, like in the sort of French tradition of setting a poem to song. And in fact, the chanson tradition has long roots in Russia as well. And Dymok is in fact an example of a very particular tradition of chanson, which is known as blatnaya piesня, basically criminals chanson. And this style of music kind of keeps up a lot of the style, the sort of the vocal style of what you'd expect from classical chanson, in the style of something like, I don't know, Jacques Brel. But it also glorifies petty gang violence and crime that would, at least in a lot of cases, be prevalent in the singers' lives, in a way that we would be more familiar with gangster rap from the United States. So there's kind of a similar thing going on there. Similar also in the way that authorities in Russia have often tried to intercede to kind of stop the popularity of this genre. And that's true also for this song, because Dymok first went viral in like 2024, a year after its release. And then Russian authorities started kicking up a fuss about it because it's kind of glorifying drugs, and eventually got actually taken off of YouTube in Russia. But as these things go, that obviously made it only more popular. And anyway, yeah, that's just the context. This was actually quite a big hit in the Russian-speaking world, as I'm saying. But why am I including it? It might seem puzzling to you if you kind of check out this song. You know, at best, you might consider it a novelty, like this elderly Russian-speaking gopnik in this stripy Siemens top smoking a doobie over this kind of anachronistic electronic beat. But I not only find the song very catchy and the combination of genres very intriguing, I think above all, Dymok is an excellent encapsulation of where Russian music and, you know, by extension, Russian society is right now. In fact, for me, it kind of captures a feeling of existential malaise that has defined Russian civil society since, you know, the kind of shock therapy privatizations of the 90s. And it's a situation that I, like many others, can't really in the immediate term see the country finding its way out of. Which, just by the way, and I'm aware I'm already talking about politics, not even, you know, 10 minutes into these videos, but I think that's also accounts to a large extent how we can explain Vladimir Putin's ethno-nationalist project and his wars of expansion right now as leader of Russia, as a sort of a last-ditch effort at national cohesion. But anyway, let's get back to the song here. Dymok, I think, is remarkable for Cıper's embrace of hedonism, of this old white guy essentially saying that the world, but Russia in particular, is just fucked, but that you can light up and forget about it and be just content with what you have. And I think that's a powerful escapist statement that we shouldn't dismiss out of hand. I think that's at the root of the song's popularity in Russia and in other Russian-speaking countries. I'm kind of conflating that here, but since the song is in Russian and was a big success in Russia, I think that's only fair. And, you know, you could say to all of this, I'm reading way too much into what's just a fairly shallow pop song. But firstly, you're going to find that it's literally going to be my modus operandi for this entire list. And secondly, I think there is evidence of that in the song's musical makeup as well. Because for a big pop hit, it's a really muted minor key affair. And barring the occasional like retro Europop or synth pop hit, that has been what popular music in Russia has been reduced to for the last, well, decade and more, really. And I'm not saying that so much in a negative sense, but really I find it quite interesting because I think pop music of any society at any time reflects the kind of larger conditions of that society in the time that it exists. And, you know, in Russia right now, I think there's little to no perspective of improvement, but people still make do. And a song like Ицyk's Dymok is a sort of soundtrack for that. Moving on to number 99, at which point I probably should also mention that not every single pick on this list is going to be as obscure as that first one, nor am I going to go into as excruciating detail as I did just there. Some of these songs are even going to be fairly popular pop songs, but pop singers, including number 99 here, Chappell Roan, Casual, from Roan's 2023 breakout album, The Rise and Fall of the Midwest Princess, although it would take until kind of the year after for Chappell Roan to really sort of ascend to that pop superstar status that she kind of manifested for herself with this really good album. Now, Chappell Roan has shown a lot of versatility since the release of this album in 2023. She has kind of offered herself forward as an heiress to the weird pop throne of Kate Bush with the new romantic banger Good Luck Babe. She also kind of presented herself as a Shania Twain reloaded on the urban cowboy of The Giver. And then in 2025, she was inspired mostly by the alternative 90s jangle pop scene on something like The Subway. But on Casual, which is the pick of the Midwest Princess album that I chose for this list, she is fully in Taylor Swift mode. Taylor Swift is easily the biggest influence on this song. I mean, just listen to it. It's like an emotionally naked confessional that is, you know, romantic in the poetic sense, but also deeply over emotional, over sharing in a really direct, in a really hard hitting, beautiful way. I mean, on this list, I would of course also loved to include Pink Pony Club, which honestly, on merit alone, could have, probably been a contender for the top 5 of this list, if not the number 1 spot, if it had been fit to be included. But even though that song took until 2025 to get the laurels it deserved, it is not a 2023 release by any stretch of the margin. It was already fairly old then already, so I had to sort of disqualify that one. Casual is a really excellent song in and of itself as well, one of the highlights of the Midwest Princess album. Moving on to number 98, Oneohtrix Point Never, World Outside. Got myself a little cup of coffee for this one. So this is, of course, Daniel Lopatin, alias Oneohtrix Point Never, who, one of the sort of seminal electronic music artists, electronic composers of the 2010s. He would, after the release of his 2023 album Again, which this song is taken off of, pivot back again to his more purely instrumental vaporwave electronic soundscapes that kind of originally made him famous in the early 2010s, with the release of, in particular, Tranquilizer in 2025, and also his score for Josh Safdie's Marty Supreme, which, if you ask me, was the best part of that film by quite a margin. But 2023's Again, which forms, I think, a rough sort of trilogy, I'd say, between 2018's Aid of and then also 2020's Magic Oneohtrix Point Never, saw the Boston composer, electronic music artist, for the first time kind of veer towards a more pop direction. Now, this album isn't really pop by any stretch of the imagination, but it did show this musician incorporate choruses, his own sung vocals and kind of recurring melodies to a far greater extent than was previously the case in his, occasionally fairly harsh, abrasive electronic releases. And while I understand that for some fans that makes this sort of rough trilogy of albums a bit less cohesive and a bit more all over the place compared to his instrumental electronic releases, I think you do yourself a grave disservice by skipping over these 3 albums, because it's really here, I think, and not in the brilliant otherworldly soundscapes of Tranquilizer, that you start to understand why it is that this guy, Daniel Lopatin, whose music is so strange and frequently very abrasive, that he has become kind of the successor to Bon Iver's Justin Vernon as the pop producer du jour, as the kind of left field outsider in pop music that so many big pop stars nowadays want to work with. And that's everyone from like MGMT to Caroline Polachek to Charlie XCX to David Byrne to FKA Twigs to The Weeknd to Wise Blood as well. And he's made his mark on the sounds of all of these artists. He's made his mark on a lot of the sound of pop music in the 2010s and 2020s, we could argue. And I'm particularly fascinated by songs like World Outside, which is my pick from several really brilliant songs on this album. This song to me sounds a little bit like a sort of a time travel electronic prog song from the 70s. What do I mean by that? I mean, like, imagine like a hypothetical prog rock musician from the 70s, post sort of Woodstock generation, experimenting with synthesizers and electronic sounds and influenced by that German krautrock and all of that. But like, kind of going much farther than what he would have had at his disposal at this time, and kind of building off the electronic sounds that we have in our current timeline because of artists like Björk in the 2000s, or Sweet Trip, or in the 2010s artists like Clarence Clarity or Keith Rankin from Death's Dynamic Shroud, and sending that through a time capsule back to the 1970s, because it has that kind of like structure and approach of something like almost like a band like Yes, but then like Yes having time traveled and ended up in the vaporwave dimension. Next up, number 97, Eartheater, Pure Smile Snake Venom. This is a Russian-American multi-instrumentalist Alexandra Druchin, aka Eartheater. She's behind one of my favourite art pop songs of the whole decade, probably 2020's How to Fight. And while I have to admit I lost track of her output a little bit since then, the glorious Pure Smile Snake Venom was a triumphant return to form for Druchin. This is like an elfin ballad that could have easily slotted right into FK Twigs' Magdalene album. And I think the highest compliment I can pay to the song is that I actually feel a little bit like a snake being charmed while listening to it. And on that alone, I consider it a success. Now, number 96, Phuyu y la Fantasma, ¿Qué más da si el huracán? This is of my second favourite EP of the year, which is
El Pacífico albergará nuestros huesos by young Chilean rock band Phuyu La Fantasma, who I honestly think is probably one of the most exciting rock bands in the world right now, and I mean that. They're a band that have further developed the eclecticist approach of Britain's windmill scene that has by now sort of dispersed, hasn't it? But they have begun from the very different starting point of traditional Chilean cueca music. And I know this makes it sound like one of those picks from my list that sound needlessly obscure, and it might make me look like a poseur for including it if my pronunciation of the word poseur wasn't enough to do that already. But this is legitimately a song that you should check out. I mean, even if you don't speak Spanish, you don't need to speak Spanish to enjoy this. If you just have like a passing interest, if you've ever at any point in your life enjoyed bands like Animal Collective or Black Country New Road or Radiohead or all three of those bands together, then you really owe it to yourself to check this out. The whole EP is a brilliant collage where no two songs are really the same or even from the same genre. Like it goes from sort of freak folk to emo to post rock to dream pop to a whole lot of other things at the same time. And the track that I picked, Que más da si el huracán, is maybe not necessarily the most musically complex of the EP, but it is an emo, slowcore, post-hardcore number, which, it's just right up my street. Number 95, The Deep, Bappi. This is the first K-pop pick for the list. There's not actually that many of them, I don't think. But it's a track I think that shows pretty well why the genre of K-pop is perhaps a misleadingly wide one nowadays, because The Deep, the artist behind this song, is a solo musician who seems to be operating largely outside of the massively commercialized K-pop studio complex. I say largely because I don't want to overstate the extent to which The Deep is independent or not. I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually do all that much research into her. I just really enjoy this song. But certainly, unlike many K-pop breakout groups, she hasn't just arrived out of nowhere with a massive image campaign from a label that's determined to make her or some group into the next big thing. She has very much, if you look at her discography, been toiling away for several years now since the release of her first singles and EPs in 2019, been putting out music regularly, gradually, getting her sound introduced to a wider audience based off the quality of her songs. And then Bappi, even this song, which is one of her biggest hits so far, has only got some like 200,000 clicks on YouTube and a little over 1 million streams on Spotify, which basically still counts as obscure in K-pop. But with all of that, even the main thing that still counts is just whether the music is good or not. And in this case, oh dear Lord, it is. And again, here, K-pop as a genre is perhaps a bit too vast, because if you look at, all the pop music that's come out of South Korea over the last 2 decades, and which shows no signs of slowing down, it's something you can see is that the pop styles coming out of that country are specializing in different niches. At least that's what the sort of most talented artists in K-pop are doing. And The Deep absolutely has to be counted among them. Interestingly, she has a very European sound, I would say. Bappi in particular sounds quite British, in fact, because it's got this kind of contemporary take on two-step that's maybe slightly more club ready than the stuff you hear from Pink Pantheress, but they could easily slot into the same playlist. It's a super energetic, fun pop song by an artist that you should definitely be paying attention to. Her whole 2024 EP, Electric Pink, is well worth checking out as well. And I'm really not tiring of this girl. She's absorbing this wide array of influences from turn of the 20th century British pop music, bubblegum bass, the PC music scene, Azealia Banks if she was unproblematic, but also the more direct, uncomplicated endorphin hits of K-pop itself. What can I say? Her bitches are all popping and they hit her with a profit. That's what she's saying. And I for one, am happy for her. I'm loving this. I'm loving Bappi, which is indeed a bop. Moving on to number 94, which is a French language pick. Definitely one that I'd recommend to all my French-speaking friends, but also all my lovers of hip-hop and rap. This is JeuneCrack and Hologram Lo featuring Infinit with Joue, comme off the brilliant EP La Pieuvre by the former two. Hologram Lo is the producer here. JeuneCrack is a white kid from the sort of French Mediterranean city of Toulouse who really has no business sounding as gangster as he does on this track, on this EP, but he kind of somehow pulls it off. This is, a really, really good rap cut. He's probably like one of the sort of rappers to watch in France right now. I mean, they've got kind of a host of great like short length EPs and collaborations that they've released already that are all worth your time. This one, I could have kind of picked any track off this EP, but the one that I went for is the Infinit collaboration Joue, comme, because this is, I think, a beautiful example of a back and forth duet in hip hop of how two different voices, two different rappers can complement each other. The way that, you know, their ear for melodies and their ear for, you know, each other and sort of how to kind of bounce off one off the other is something that any lover of the genre should appreciate, whether you speak French or not. Number 93, Cicada, Foggy Rain, an ode to the regenerative placidity of nature, as calming as the sight of the snow melting on an alpine heath. That's what this song sounds like to me. It's from a wonderful, really, really gorgeous new age ambient record by the Taiwanese chamber music collective Cicada. The album's called Seeking the Sources of Streams. This song, Foggy Rain, was one of my highlights from it. A really, really beautiful, touching piece of instrumental music. Number 92, Joeyy, Coat I Would Buy. A song that raises the troubling question of what the hell do we do now that the alt-right has started making good cloud rap? And finishing up the first 10 at number 91, a lot of artists on this one, Tainy, Balvin, Miko, and Joeyy, Colmillo. This is my pick of the album Data by reggaeton heavyweight Tainy, which I think is surely one of the best producer albums of the ongoing decade. A lot of songs of this album that I could have gone for. My pick ultimately was for the Balvin, Miko, Joeyy and collaboration Colmillo, which is the kind of shape-shifting, progressive hip-hop pop song that's made possible, I think, by forerunners like Lady Gaga's Bad Romance, Travis Scott's Sicko Mode and Ray's Escapism, and all of it is held together by the really, really strong central vocal performance of young Miko. If you've still got any stupid and, to be frank, colonialist preconceptions about reggaeton as like an innately less worthy, lesser genre of music, just fucking sit down and listen to this. Hopefully it'll change your mind, and, you know, there's more where that came from, and there's more where this came from as well. I'm going to keep these lists going, be back soon with a fresh batch of really, really good songs, my favourite songs from 2023, so keep tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed it, and yeah, peace out.